Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the Skymaster F14. Goal in this video is to get this nose bolted onto this aircraft. So stay tuned and we will hopefully get that completed. All right, so continuing on from last video, we got a bunch of the midsection stuff run forward. We do need to get the rest of the wires run forward and kind of finish up anything in the back end here before we can bolt that nose on. As a final step, before we bolt that nose on, we have to put our fuel tank in and do the connections up to the fuel tank. So there's quite a bit to do before we bolt that nose on, but I think it's going to be doable in this video, which is awesome. As soon as we bolt that nose on, this plane gets way bigger and it kind of gets way more real as far as getting this thing completed. So very excited for that. All right, so as we go through this, guys, I'm just kind of my normal process of organizing an aircraft like this. So I've got a clip installed on the top of the airframe there, another plastic clip here. Now these clips, when we start jamming a bunch of wires in there, we won't be able to close them, but that's okay because this holds the wires just fine like that. And we could also add another clip there, but I think I'm good with the way that that's done, and the wires are going to be nice and sturdy. So the bundle of wires coming from all the control surfaces on the right side of the aircraft, we have covered that in snakeskin again as well. So all of those wires are covered. This last wire here is for the lighting setup. This is the right rudder red, and so that's going to just basically come over, go to the other side. So all we need to do on this side is solder the Unilight connector on there and get it plugged in and run over that way. And then we've got our air line from these two tanks right here, and this is on the other side the same air line from the other two tanks. So we're going to repeat the same thing basically on the other side with running the control surfaces and stuff like this. This side has all the airlines coming from the back section, so there's extra airlines on this side. That side, or the left side, is only the control surfaces. So one thing we're going to need to do with the JetSmunts cable here, now this cable is the one that goes in between the control ECU or data relay module and the turbine itself. So this is pretty typical on most turbines now, like Swewin's the same way, where this cable is fairly short. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an extension cable up, and the extension cable is going to be basically another foot longer, and that's going to bring us to this area right here, which is where the control units are going to be mounted. So that's going to be perfect, and what we'll do is we'll get those cables made up. We'll heat shrink those together so there's no way for those to separate. Other thing you can do on a cable like this is you could just shoe goop it. You could use string and go in between there. So there's lots of different ways to do that. Heat shrinks nice and quick. All right, we got a lot more wiring cleaned up here, and this is good. So basically this side is almost complete. Just have the airline to tee up together. And what I've done on this side here for the equipment tray is also installed 2 servo plugs. Now the servo plugs, what those are for, our brains of our turbines are going to be sitting in this area, or probably better said, hidden underneath the cockpit, because getting to that is going to would be basically taking the cockpit out, which we don't want to do. So these are our GSU plugins for each turbine. So left turbine, right turbine. So we just need to get those wired up. We still have to just run our wires for the actuators forward, but this side, all of our servo wires got run forward. And this is our filler tray, glued in our little catch for the filler nozzle or filler end, and then all these wires here are all going to go to the Unilite controller, so they're just sitting up top. So yeah, a lot of our wiring's all cleaned up and run forward now at this point. So last things to do here is we need to run our wires for the Unilites forward. So that would be the wire that controls the Unilite controller. So that needs to run forward. We need to deal with our airlines here, put our Unilite connectors on so we can plug those in. Same thing on this side, we need to run the Unilite afterburner throttle cable forward and get a couple things run forward here. So really close to being ready to bolt this nose on. And our bundle of wires and stuff and tubes continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I did make up extension cables for the turbine. So that's about a 1 foot extension cable, just so we can again get the turbine plugged into the control module, which sits right in the front part of the cockpit. So, okay, so little tiny updates. I'll do these updates for you in tiny little updates because I'm just getting lots of stuff done. So, what I've done here is I've soldered the light controllers all together, so the inputs on both the light controller and the afterburner controller are all soldered together on our silicone power line. And I've left these attached to the spools for now, just so I can figure out how much wire to leave running forward. So I'll get that dealt with. Also, the light controllers, made an extension up for those. Those are going to run forward. So next thing is just making up the leads for the data terminal plugins. Well guys, this doesn't happen very often, but Nez the cat is sleeping. Okay, so this tray here, what I did was I added 2 plug-in leads, as I've talked about. Now these leads are going to go to the turbines. So what we're going to do is, even though the Jetty radio has all of the telemetry data and everything on there, which is awesome, we now have 2 plugins for the turbines mounted on this tray. Okay guys, so we are basically buttoned up here as far as all the wiring goes. The only thing left to do in this back end is the airline itself. So we've just got to join those 2 airlines together from both sides and plumb them into the system here and then run them forward. And then all these cables here, those can stay back here and they get plugged into the Unilite, the main controller that's buried in there. So that's awesome. That is going really well. There's lots of wires. It is, it's pretty nuts how much is in this aircraft. All right, so we are successfully done back here. We've got our fuel fill system here that David uses. So this, hopefully this all makes sense now. So basically when you fill up, his fuel jug has this fitting on it that plugs in there. It's like a quick fitting. If you think of an air coupler, you turn the valve on, you fill. It's going to fill both of the UATs at the same time. When you're done, turn that off. This also has a blocker in it as well too, like a seal, but this is just an extra just in case. And then that just goes in its little house just to make sure it catches any fuel spills and stuff like that. So anyways, really cool setup here, nice and clean. We still have the light wires to deal with. So this side is done. Now the only thing left to install on this side is our plate with our 2 GSU hookups. So that's going to get put there and we're going to run those wires forward. And there's a shot of the right side of the aircraft and everything there is also complete. All right, so there is our 14 before we put the tank in and bolt the nose on. So next thing to do is try to jam the tank in this space and get it past all that stuff. That might be a bit of a challenge, but there's our leads coming forward. Now you do have a decent amount of room still like once the nose is bolted on here, if you needed to get something back there, it is possible. With the way this inside's designed here, you've got pretty darn good access through all the former work because it's so wide open. So if we do need to change anything, modify anything, it's not the end of the world. I don't need to run strings. I can just use a wire, a stiff wire, and fish that all the way through, and it won't be a problem at all. So yeah, that's awesome. Ready to bolt the nose on almost. All right, guys, and we got some parts delivered here from Pro Airframe RC. So I just want to get your guys' opinion on this stuff, mainly if we should carry it on the website. All my 3D stuff that I carry is made locally here, and one of the cool things about this Pro RC airframe stuff is it is made in the USA, which is really cool. Now all of this stuff is aluminum, which is pretty slick. Totally different than the 3D printed parts. So let's take a look at these things, and we will we'll see what they look like. But ultimately, I'd like your guys' opinion on whether this would be something you'd be interested in. Should I put it on the website? Should I carry this stuff for stock? So that's ultimately the question. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this stuff. But let's take a quick look at these parts. Okay, so the MSRPs are all listed here, but we've got a couple different things. So MPX panel mount. So this is going to be for an MPX connector. Now these things are insanely light. If I was to guess, just based on how it feels, like it feels next to nothing. And it's probably very similar to a 3D printed part. So weight is definitely not going to be an issue, but really nice quality on these things as well too, which is great. The finish is really nice. It's not a cheesy blue anodization. It's a nice deep blue, and just feels like a great part. So these things would list for about $15 US. We've got the XT60 panel mounts. So basically the same thing as the MPX we just looked at, but these are for the XT60. So those guys would retail for about $16. We've got the PA3002, so that's a dual XT60 mount. So you could mount this to a surface, and then you have your XT60 plugs, which you could plug in. So that one is going to list for about $17, or would list. We've got a valve holder plus magnetic fuel port. So pretty slick little unit here as well too. So this guy lists for $27. Let's open this one up. So you've got your fuel tubing, fill tubing coming out of there. This is your fuel plug, and then it is magnetized in place, which is great. And then this is your valve holder, so your on-off valve for your turbine. So pretty cool little setup there. And then our last one is just a magnetic fuel port. So no valve holder, just the magnetic fuel port. Again, pretty cool little unit. And this guy would retail for about $19 US. So let me know what you guys think about that stuff. I think it looks pretty slick. Obviously, it's a little bit more money than the 3D printed stuff, but different quality, different styles, different items, which is great. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about that stuff. Let me know if you think it's something that you would purchase if we listed it on the website. So let's get back to the 14. All right, guys, so just working on the last little bit here, which is the lighting harness for these lights here on the side. So basically all of 4 of these lights, so 1, 2, 3, 4, are going to be wired to one output on the Unilight controller. Now the Unilight controller for the main lights has 8 outputs, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, chin is 4, wingtip is 5, 6, 7, and then the front nose light is 8. So that's why these 4 have to be wired together. No problems with that, we just need to make an appropriate harness. So what I've done is I have put together with a power box servo connector here, 2 of the lights, so these 2 green ones and those 2 red ones come to this wiring harness right there. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to make up a wiring harness that goes from the Unilite controller to these guys. So what that looks like here is I've taken 2 runs of power box wire, taken the white wire out, and I'm just soldering this connector, which is the Unilite connector, onto those wires. This will plug into the Unilite controller, then I'll put the servo ends on this side, and the leads that I just showed you will plug into here. All right, guys, and it is tip time, brought to you by trusty bent screwdriver. All right, so tip time in this episode revolves around wiring and organizing. So as we get ready to bolt this nose on, one of the things we need to keep in mind here is the landing gear is right there. Okay, so all of our wiring and tubes and everything come right to this location. So they all come down the sides here. So you just want to pay attention to that. So with these wiring harness that I just did up as an example for these side lights, there's a fair bit of excess here so I could get them connected. Well, so I can't just shove those in there in the side of the plane, because what's going to happen is there's a chance eventually that it will make its way over to the landing gear here and we have a gear issue. So just be mindful of that stuff. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bundle all of these wires together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bundle all of these cables together with probably a zip tie. And it's not going to be overly tight or anything, but it's just going to keep all of those cables in a nice bundle far away from the gear. Okay, so just be mindful of that stuff. These are the things you want to pay attention to, which ultimately make a longer lasting, more reliable aircraft. Try and think of these problems before they happen and make sure they never happen. So anyways, that's your tip time for this episode. All right, guys, so there is a shot of the right side of the aircraft. I basically just zip tied everything to the former work there, which ultimately is a fairly easy thing to do. Now, this isn't overly tight, okay? That's one of the keys here is I've left this loose. So long term, if we have to pull anything through, that's, you know, maybe we need to replace a line or something like that. There's enough flexibility in these zip ties that you probably would be able to pull that stuff through. So anyways, there's a shot for you. Everything's now off to the side so we can fit the tank in. It's going to be a bit of a challenge to get it by all this stuff, but it's now clear of interfering with the landing gear on either side of this aircraft. All right, so tank, we have talked about this previously when we did the tank up, so that is all ready to go. Now, the 8mm Festo lines coming forward here from the saddle tanks are going to go to the vent, right? So these are the fill lines for the saddle tanks. So these red lines are going to go to the UATs. So basically the next big step here is to get this tank installed in the aircraft. Now this is a challenge because we got all these lines and they all have to sit kind of nice and flat to squeeze that tank in, but it does work. So I'm going to mess with this and I'll show you guys the results. All right, I figured I would bring you guys along for the journey here of stuffing this tank in. So it's actually quite nice that these are bundled together on the sides of the fuselage. So we've just tucked all these things off to the side, trying to make them as flat as possible, and just squeezing this tank in nice and slowly. It is a very tight fit. And this is a great time in the video, guys, to thank each and every one of you that have donated to the shop build. Thank you so much for the donations. They are appreciated, absolutely awesome. It's super cool to see all the support coming from random viewers. Whether your donation was big or small, it's definitely appreciated and very, very appreciated. So thanks, guys. If you're not familiar with what we're doing, we are crowdfunding for the shop build, and there's a bunch of links down below. So that is the tank installed. Super cool. So this tank just gets bolted in place with 3 screws on this this main former where the airplane actually joins together. So next thing we have to do is we're going to take these lines and install them, the vent lines there. But I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bolt this tank down just so we have good access here. Then we'll get those lines attached. All right, guys, tank is installed. So I did not use the stock fasteners here. The stock fasteners are the kind of crappy Skymaster screws. So what I'm using here is the Carf Phillips wood screws that come with a bunch of their kit. So these are great screws. I kind of hoard those things and keep them. So much better screws holding that tank in. We've run these 2 lines. Keep in mind that these lines are absolutely identical in length and everything between these 2 saddle tank lines or feed lines. So that is it. We are ready to bolt this nose on, which is super exciting. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to run the Allen bolts through all of these holes just to make sure our threads are good, and then use copious amounts of Loctite on these bolts. Like everything, definitely a key item here to use Loctite. So once the nose gets bolted on, we do lose some of our access, right? So everything gets a little bit tighter. When you bolt the nose on, you only lose about maybe 6 inches of area here before the canopy opening is. So getting into this area is actually not bad at all. So we do have to build a tray in that front cockpit area to hold all of our stuff. But anyways, next step here is we are going to bolt that nose on. I'm going to grab the bolts and thread them through there. All right, guys, well, one of the cool things about the new shop is just the different perspectives and more space that we have, which allows for better filming angles and stuff. So, okay, so we are ready to bolt this nose on. I ran all the bolts through and they all thread in very nicely. I'm just putting washers on all of them here, and we got our Loctite at the ready. Okay, so this is a bit of a job because you have to get all of the wires through, and now there's 4 bolts here, and there's also 2 that go through the side of the fuselage right there into the intakes. Now those are just short little guys, but step number 1 is get all this wiring inside. There we go. So basically we just need to get 1 done up, and then we can kind of let it go. So again, copious amounts of Loctite. So I'm not going to do that up all the way. I'm just going to get it most of the way tight so we can get all of these lined up. So as far as Loctite goes, when I say copious amounts, we're not being shy with the Loctite. So we're completely covering that end of that bolt with Loctite. Okay, so with all 4 of those done up, we're installed. now it's time to tighten them up. Here we go. So I got them hand tight with the Allen key, the normal one. Now I'll take my L bend and just kind of give them about a quarter turn roughly just to make sure they're 100% tight. And then what I'll do is I'm going to find these small ones that go on the side and we'll get those guys installed as well. All right guys, and there she is. Massive, massive airplane. The F-14 has its nose bolted on. Super cool. You know, these planes don't really look that big until they're assembled like this. When you've got rear sections separate from front sections, they're big, but when you bolt them together like this is a huge airplane. So really cool. We do have the nose cone to go on there, which adds about another foot or so. So guys, that was the successful part of this video. That was my goal for this video, is to get that nose bolted on. Obviously, we had a ton of organizing to do in this plane to get that nose bolted on. The wiring of an aircraft like this is definitely a huge part of this aircraft. Now, I feel like now we are about probably easily 75% done, maybe 80% done on the actual build of this aircraft. The wings are done, fuselage is bolted together, all the back wiring is finished and run forward. Now we get into the next fun stuff that I really enjoy, and that's the equipment layout, organizing all that stuff, which is great. So really looking forward to kind of the final steps of this aircraft build, and it's going to be fun. So next episode, we will start to get into the organizing of the stuff, all the equipment of the aircraft. We've got a bunch of paint touch-ups to do. We've got, you know, little things here and there to do. So that's what the final videos are going to be about with this aircraft. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button down below. That way you get notified when I release new videos. Doesn't cost you a thing to subscribe to the channel, and apparently the YouTube algorithm really likes subscribers. So that would be awesome if you would do that. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.